Hello and welcome back to another SSD test for the PlayStation 5. I just wanted to add this disclaimer at the beginning because this video was recorded a few weeks ago when the PlayStation 5 software was in beta, and although it's available for everyone and these SSDs do work exactly the same now that the feature is available for everyone, I did think it was important to highlight this video was recorded during the beta, so just to let you know. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let's start. Hello and welcome back, and that's right, we're doing another SSD test, and once again it's the return of the Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus. It's one of the earliest SSDs we tested, and this is the fourth test for this SSD. Today's games are Hitman 3, Terminator Resistance, Dead by Daylight, Red Dead Redemption 2 and No Man's Sky, not in that order probably. All four of these games have been moved over to the SSD storage. So there's the internal SSD and there is our M.2 SSD storage right there. And if we move in, we can see that all five of those games have been moved over. Look at the size of some of these games. In particular, Red Dead Redemption 2, a PS4 game there, but still weighing in 110 gig. That game is massive. So what we're going to be doing today is bench testing a load of load scenarios for these games. We're going to be looking about how they compare in terms of frame rate, in terms of asset management, in terms of load times and more. But it's worth remembering that, as mentioned, this is the fourth video I've done on this SSD testing its loading and storage capabilities compared to the internal PS5 SSD. So if you've not watched those yet, I strongly recommend you watch those first. There's a lot of information with regards to the benchmarks as well as data being moved back and forth onto the disk, and some explanations about why the transfer speeds may not be as good as you might expect on any SSD, not just this one. But for now, let's load up Hitman 3. And in this game, we're going to be loading up two different scenarios. We're going to be loading up the Dartmoor area and then the Mendoza area. Both of these we're using challenge-based missions. We're not using the main story missions because they've got long old cutscenes, and some of them are interspersed with cutscenes in the middle, which make kind of managing and keep an eye on the loading times a little bit tougher. Also, this game, we're not assessing how long it takes to load to this point because there's lots of network and internet-based connectivity, as you see there, and therefore this adds a random element to comparing that internal SSD versus that of the Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus. And this way, from this point, we're able to keep a better eye on the loading times of things as far as just the SSD's resource management and the read activity. So again, not the main story mission. We're going for the Baskerville Barney. From here, we're going to go ahead and play from here. We're going to compare against the internal SSD in 3, 2, 1, go. Have them loading up. You can see there on screen at the top left the internal PS5 SSD, the top right the Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus SSD. I can only see the Sabrent during recording, but that did feel very good there. And again, we can compare that against the surrounding environment all around us. Looking around, it seems fine. So let's make our way into this area. This is more for kind of distance management and texture swaps. The other level that we're going to be looking at, we've selected based on NPC management, something that will become a lot clearer later. But for now, what we're looking at is what happens as we make our way through this area and transition through the internal and the external areas of this game. What we need to do is very quickly make our way over here. We're going to go ahead and cap a guard very quickly. And after taking his uniform, make our way into the house. It won't give us much of a disguise, but it'll give us a mini amount of time so we're able to go ahead and explore a lot more easily throughout this house without being annoyed too much by guards. Oh, ignore my phone there in the background, how super annoying that is. So what we're going to do now is make our way into the map. So let's go ahead and go through it. And again, we're going to push past the guards, and all we're looking at here is how quickly assets are managed. We're just double checking, so we're going to make our way through the middle of the house before all the guards are 100% going to blow me to smithereens. Again, we're not even going to bother dealing with the targets or anything like that. All we're trying to do right now is push through the game and force it to introduce those assets as quickly as possible. Some of the environments of Hitman 3 are genuinely huge, the biggest in the game series we've ever seen, and consequently there's a lot of resources, a lot of textures to manage, and when you're not looking at a lot of these things, the game is being forced to destroy or at least lower render all of these assets, even though they are still on the playing space. Consequently, you can push the game quite hard, and as we're seeing here, and of course as we look at objects, the texture will be swapped out into the high-res texture. But for now, I'm quite pleased with this, so why don't we make our way onto the next save area in this game. So let's come out of it here, and from here we can make our way in, and again now we're going onto the Mendoza area. So the Mendoza area, again, not using the first party main campaign mission. We're using this one here, the Pascal Consortium. We're looking at NPCs. So let's go in 3, 2, 1. And what we're looking at here is running around. Are we going to see any low texture polys? Are we going to see any T-poses? Are we going to see any of the AI having no faces? All of these are things that can so easily happen if the game doesn't manage a lot of the resources correctly. We can look around, it's all fine there. So from here, what we're going to do is take advantage of this guard's outfit. That will buy us a small amount of time. And from here, we can then take his outfit and then run around this very large play space that has a lot of AI dotted around it. And that's what we're doing. Because this area is one of the largest and most densely populated NPC areas, not just in terms of the numerical number of NPCs, but how closely patched they are together, this will allow us to see if the SSD is going to struggle with any of this. So we'll keep pushing through. I'm going to keep knocking into people, but again, slight button press delay as I go through it here. But again, all of these NPCs will interact if you bump into them, if you knock their drink, anything like that. All of these things can bring attention to you, but it's good the game has been forced to have to create that kind of element of NPC interactivity. And there's a lot of activity that the game has to keep an eye on while we're pushing through. But for now, I'm seeing no problems at all. The lighting effects are still good. We're not seeing any issues with regards to textures, no blocks, no popping of resources. It's running absolutely fine, and obviously the game is going to be destroying a lot of these assets from the distance, but even here we can still see the low textures in the distance there of other NPCs, and the game is still doing a great job of managing all of that. But for now, I'm going to call that a success, and we'll make our way onto our next game, Terminator Resistance. So we're loading up get that right, loading up Terminator Resistance there. There we go, too many videos, sore throat. But we're loading into it now, and again we're doing a single save here. We're going to be loading into infiltration mode of this game where you play as a Terminator, and mainly we're looking at this game handling a lot of the frame rate, and we're looking at a lot of the distance management, something that you'll see later in the video. But for now, we're going to go in for the infiltration mode there, and we're going to load in 3, 2, 1. Oh, no, we're going to go into the difficulty settings first. I keep forgetting that. 3, 2, 1. And here we go. We're loading out the loading screen there. Lots of items dotted around here. And mainly, we're looking at how quickly it loads the game for us there compared with the internal SSD. We could skip this cutscene that's about to appear on screen, but I'm keeping it on so that in the post-production we can see how quickly it pulls this FMV file, because this is definitely not being built in real time. We're definitely seeing a full motion video that's already been pre-recorded here. And remember, what we're looking at is we want to see how well this game maintains its frame rate with lots of information on screen, and we're going to consistently run, because even though this is, you know, a PS5 game, I've got to say its handling of loading assets, it seems to be a little slower than a lot of the other games out there, which suggests a slightly less efficient way of handling it. So this will be a great way to test if the SSD, the Sabrent, is going to be able to stand up to the internal PS5 SSD. But for now, let's go in and kill ourselves a dude, because Because what we want now is we want to grab ourselves a gun. Not that we probably don't even need it, but for now, what we're doing here is we're making our way around the map. We can go back to normal mode. You can see all of that fog there and the lighting effects coming all the way through. So it's definitely doing a very good job there of still looking incredibly graphically intensive, even if it is just about 4 colors at any given time. But for now, let's go ahead and keep moving forward with the Terminator view on, because that has a lot more resources there on screen. And I think it's a good way to challenge this SSD in a number of other ways. If we carry on moving through, we're seemingly carrying on as normal. We may be hitting an invisible wall there. That's a shame. But for now, let's carry on into the game. And I think it's loading fine. I'm seeing no drop in frame rate. I see the assets running absolutely fine there. Again, everything's running the way I would expect it. And, you know, faultless stuff here. The game is loading. I'm happy. Let's make our way onto the next game, which is, of course, No Man's Sky. In No Man's Sky, this is a game that has incredibly long front-end load times, but at the same time, when you're in the game, it has plenty of invisible loading. That's a loading happening in the background with assets being pulled from out of your view very quickly, or assets being introduced in very low, medium, high, and high quality texture quality. So the result is, as we go for a new save here, that as we go through these, this game, comparing against the internal PS5 SSD, every time we see different scenarios in the creative mode. Consequently, we're not measuring this per se in its loading time. We will highlight how quickly it loads the game. But given we're looking at random worlds every time in random parts of this game's universe, it makes it very hard to track that. What we're tracking here is how quickly we can get our ship off the planet into a spaceport, look around the spaceport, leave the spaceport, get back to a planet. We want to see how well the game handles this transition. 3, 2, 1. Bear in mind, you are going to see a drop in frame rate in just a second as the logo appears. Everyone that plays the No Man's Sky knows about this. It doesn't matter whether you're playing it on Xbox, PS4, PS5, whatever. For some reason, the drop in frame rate there as the game is populating the universe with information that's known versus unknown, the result is you always see a drop there. But here we are on a snow planet here. Let's make our way into the game. And again, all we're going to be looking at here is how quickly we can get the game to get us to the spaceport, and is there going to be any issues along the way. Now, you're going to see a drop in frame rate there. I can't see that, but I know it's going to come across in the edit, and unfortunately that is unavoidable. It's a conflict between the capture card and the output of the PS5. Let's move. So you're going to see a blur on screen there. That's not being caused by the SSD, that kind of low texture there all the way around. I can't see that, but I know you guys can when I look around. So again, we're not judging the SSD on that. This is the capture, and it should be visible there both on the internal SSD and using the Sabrent here for our testing. What we're looking at is how well the game handles these transitions from this SSD, which I would argue constitute, you know, fairly standard expectations from gaming on this SSD via your PS5. But for now, we can make our way into this spaceport. We're going to jump out real quick, have a very quick look round, get the game to decide that it thinks we don't need the outside assets for now and introduce more assets very, very quickly. But mainly what we're doing here is we want to kind of see that everything's loading fine and get back into the vehicle and force the game to have to load some of those assets back in as we go outside as quickly as possible. And from there, make our way onto the nearest planet, which I'm going to go with this one. And again, you're going to see that blurring there as we go into the pulse. Remember, mainly what we're trying to do is get as quickly as possible here onto the surface of the planet to try and force the game into, you know, revealing any inconsistencies or problems with its loading abilities there. So we can go ahead there. We're going in for the loading. We're almost at planet level. And again, it's loaded in a number of those assets, you know, as we've arrived onto the surface. Maybe it could have been better, I think, on this SSD there. Whether that's the SSD or not, let's see if other tests show that off. How much of the game's assets there were loaded up as we hit the planet level. We were playing the game in an alarmist way. But again, I did see a little bit of pop there, something we may come back to later. But for now, let's make our way into our next game, Red Dead Redemption 2, a game with a horrendously slow load time. Let's go into it there. And with Red Dead Redemption 2, our main ambition here is just to load up a simple save file. We're going to make our way to the Blackwater area, go into a couple of buildings, and ultimately see how well the game deals with pulling its resources from the NVMe SSD rather than the internal SSD. We're going to see how they compare, and of course, we're looking at how quickly the game loads. But it is worth remembering that this game is still going to be running multiple random scenarios. So when you are loading this game, do bear in mind, if you're doing your own tests, that because the game introduces lots of random elements, that might institute a 1/10 of a second here, a 100th of a second, maybe a full second of difference in loading time, so do bear that in mind. Another thing, I am going to the end of the game, and this is a part of the game that has a giant spoiler walking around in the middle of it, and if you don't want the end of Red Dead 2 spoiled, fast forward this video about 3 to 4 minutes. But otherwise, let's load this game in 3, 2, 1. And from here, we're going to see the game loading into the Blackwater area. Again, there is always going to be an element of the random about where and how the game introduces us in, so do bear that in mind. But for now, it'll be interesting to see if the game loads up pretty close or even faster to the internal SSD. I can't imagine it being much slower regardless of random elements, because every test we've done so far has performed remarkably well on this game. It's got a hell of a long front-end load time. I know they hide a lot of the loading in-game, but still exceptionally long front-end load there. But for now, we're in the Blackwater area, so let's start making our way around and head back into the town. Again, I apologise for the clicky-clacking of my controller as I do all of this. Let's call the horse as we start running in. And yeah, the game seems to be running fine. I'm seeing no low textures there, no popping. But again, we're going to have to wait until we're in the more populated areas before we can really call out any problems on this. We're not seeing a drop in frame rate. We're seeing no issues there. Still running fine. Again, let's jump on the horse. Make this a little bit more constructive. But for now, yep, that seems to be running fine. We can look around. Even go into that mode there. So we make our way around from the inside mode and see textures a little bit closer there. Make our way into a saloon as well. Again, this is going to be a very useful way to check those textures. Again, we still seem to be running fine there. So let's jump off and make our way into the saloon. Not seeing any problems still absolutely fine. We've got the slowdown of the door handling there. And yeah, I think that's absolutely fine. For this game, I think that's running exactly how I would expect it. The textures of the people, everything's running as fine as I'd like. So for now, let's make our way into our final game, which is Dead by Daylight. Again, PS4 game that's been upscaled to PS5. Let's load it there. We're going to be running an offline mode. It's us with bots, because we didn't want to introduce an online element because there may be delays with characters, their own internet connection, communication with the server provided for Dead by Daylight that you communicate with. So we're only running an offline mode utilizing bots. And all we're doing in this offline mode is just running around the map. We're not going to try and play the game. We're not going to let the game kind of have an expectation of how we play, and therefore it can, keep an eye on resources. What we're doing right now is running around the length and breadth of the area of play in order to see if we can push the game a little bit in a way that it isn't used to being played. We don't expect this game to be too demanding graphically, but it's still going to have preset loading and asset management that we're going to try to usurp to see if that can show off any weaknesses in the SSD. But for now, let's head in. We're going with survival with bots, and let's go in 3, 2, 1. We're loading in now. Again, strangely slow loading time this game, given I would argue the assets aren't that complex, but nevertheless, we can still go into, even if you were playing online, they're still not the quickest. But yeah, let's carry on with it here. Again, all we're going to be doing is running around the map. We're not looking to try and action any stuff in game. You know, if we see the AI when we start, we may tail them, but to be perfectly honest, all we're trying to do is force the game to work. So we've got this outside environment here, all fairly standard stuff. Let's make our way in. We'll go towards the center of the map where there is a construction that we can make our way around. If we see a red light on the map, by the way, that means we're being hunted. But for now, still running fine. We've got that frame rate. Again, not hugely complex textures in this game. I know the lighting could be a little brighter there on the rendering, but remember, we're not looking in too much detail on that as a basis of comparison. But for now, we can make our way through. Let's head in, go out the rear of the map. I know it's quite dark for you guys right now. I apologise for that. Again, we'll continue moving forward, and there we go. I've managed to bump into the dude already, but for now, let's just keep running and looking around the map, because right now we're seeing no drop in slowdown. We're not doing anything where we're going to let the game have an opportunity to slow down and try to remove assets. Or if you look just into the distance as I run, you can see the game popping in assets. Now, that's not the fault of this game. This game has already, done that in the internal SSD. That's just the way it's built. But if you look just slightly above the head height of the character, you're able to see a lot of the assets pop in quite quickly. But I think for now, we can walk away. For some reason, he's decided to knife me and leave me on the floor, which is quite hilarious. But for now, let's go for it and come out of this game. I think that's running absolutely fine. So let's move these games back onto that internal SSD and summarize what we've seen today. So let's go for them there. There is all 5 of our games. Let's move them over, 261 gigs. So, again, unsurprisingly, the Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus has done very, very well. If you have already bought this SSD, or you are considering this SSD, or it's on sale, I see no reason not to go for this drive right now for your PS5 upgrade if the feature has been enabled, currently in beta at the time of recording. Again, the only thing that left me slightly with qualms was the way the assets were loaded into No Man's Sky, but that's not unheard of as a game blip rather than the SSD, so I'm inclined for hesitancy on that. Some of the SSDs that we've utilised, some of the lower grade PCIe 4 stuff, the FireCuda 520, not 530, the Silicon Power US 70, for example there. Some of these drives that we've utilised, or the Crucial P5, are ones that have had performance benchmarks that are either lower than they should be for the recommendation, or just generally low to a point where they're on the cusp. This is not one of those drives, and the performance generated so far is highly indicative of it being a decent drive for loading these games, and it's not slowed down in any of our testing, so it still has my firm recommendation in the top 5. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, click like. If you want to learn more about these SSDs and others that are out there, click subscribe, as we will cover more games and more SSDs soon. And of course, there are links in the description to all of the SSDs that I've talked about, the ones that I recommend, and heat sinks that are ideal for your PS5 SSD installation, so do check those out. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.